Good morning. Welcome. I will now call to order the December 18th, 2025 meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. Before we begin, I would like to give my colleagues a moment to introduce themselves. And before I do that, I will introduce myself, Laura Stewart. I am now the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm very excited to be here. I'm so looking forward to having these discussions to dig into our strategic plan. And I will start over here to my left.
Good morning, Brenda Wolf, District 5.
Good morning, Rita Montoya, Board Member at Large.
I should mention I am representing District 4. Next, I would like to know if there are any questions or concerns regarding the informational summary for the September 17th, 2025 meeting.
No questions.
None.
If there are no concerns, we'll begin our agenda this morning. Here is what we will review. The Strategic Plan Target Setting Overview, Goal 1 and Goal 2, Baseline Data in Mathematics, Goal 1, Objective 4, and College and Career Readiness Standard, Goal 1, Objective 5. We will look at the baseline data and Quarter 1 results, indicating a need for targeted instructional support, and review MSDE's new 2025 CCR standard to strengthen math instruction and equitable CCR access. That is college and career readiness. With that, if there are no initial questions from committee members, I will invite Dr. Addison and staff to begin with an overview of today's discussion. After each topic, we will pause to take questions from board members.
All right, thank you and good morning. Keisha Addison, Director, Shared Accountability. So thank you for the opportunity to share an update on two critical areas of our strategic plan, both academic excellence as a goal and future ready graduates as a goal. Today's discussion focuses specifically, as Ms. Stewart said, on Goal 1, Objective 4, Mathematics Proficiency and Growth, and Goal 2, Objective 5, College and Career Readiness. You'll hear from our leaders across shared accountability, curriculum development, as well as college and career readiness as we walk you through baseline data, early performance trends, and how we are aligning our work to new state expectations. This slide grounds today's discussion in the strategic plan. For Goal 1, Objective 4, our charge is to ensure all students meet proficiency benchmarks and demonstrate growth in mathematics. For Goal 2, Objective 5, we are focused on ensuring that all students have access and are successful in high-quality post-secondary outcomes. These two objectives are deeply connected. Strong mathematics outcomes are foundational to college and career readiness. At a high level, there are 5 key takeaways we want to elevate up front. First, we must set targets that are ambitious, attainable, and aligned to state expectations. Second, the baseline data presented to the full board last week reveal notable gaps in math performance that require focused attention. Third, Quarter 1 mathematics data shows some uneven implementation, indicating the need for targeted supports. Fourth, MSDE's, Maryland State Department of Education's, updated college and career standard raises expectations and requires some additional alignment across instruction, pathways, and monitoring. And finally, our immediate next steps are centered on strengthening math instruction and ensuring equitable access to college and career readiness pathways. This slide outlines how we are thinking about target setting within the strategic plan. Targets provide clarity, focus, and accountability for the system. Our work is aligned to the Maryland State Department of Education requirements and the blueprint for Maryland's future. Importantly, our work is, and our approach is equity-centered. But we will engage in starting a conversation related to targets in our future-ready strategic plan. We need to think about intentionally designed targets to close opportunity gaps. We are also going to discuss the possibility of taking a phased approach. For example, using baseline data to inform our future targets so progress can be monitored and adjusted over time. This slide marks a deliberate pause in our conversation this morning where I want you to think about where we are, going from where we are to where we are aiming to go. And so again, target setting is a critical component of the strategic plan because it translates priorities into clear expectations for the system. Well-designed targets help us define success, monitor progress over time, and hold ourselves accountable in a transparent way. Importantly, targets also create coherence across departments by aligning instructional work, professional learning, and resource decisions to shared outcomes. As we think about targets, not just for goals 1 and 2, but for our entire strategic plan, we want to intentionally balance that ambition with that realism. We want targets that push the system forward, reflect equity commitments, and are aligned again to the Maryland State Department of Education expectations. At the same time, targets must be grounded in baseline data and responsive to the instructional and implementation realities we see across schools. At this stage, we're not yet identifying any finalized targets. Instead, I'm going to propose some target setting approaches, and I'm seeking your input as a committee. Specifically, we're considering a phased approach that may include short or long-term benchmarks, disaggregated targets as a possibility to monitor equity, and the use of multiple measures. So this is an important moment for your feedback as a committee, and your perspectives will help ensure that targets ultimately adopted are meaningful, understandable, and useful for both governance and system improvement. So to start, my first question for you all as a committee, when you think about strategic plan targets, what balance do you believe is important between that ambition, those ambitious targets, as well as feasibility?
That's a great question. Can one of my colleagues like to chime in on this?
Say that again, Keisha, for me.
What balance do you believe is important between ambition and feasibility of target setting?
Resource allocation, equity, what supports might be in place or needed. Those are just some thoughts off the top of my head. But I think resource allocation is a big one.
Okay.
I agree. I think that we should think about some of our low-hanging fruit. Where can we put resources that will make a big impact, especially when we look at our gaps?
Sorry, it wouldn't turn on. I think I want to just expand on the resource allocation, because I think that when we look at our schools and we look at things like our equity add-on, which we brought last year, and you know, I personally hope will continue again this year and into the next year. I think those are great places to start in terms of what we can do here in the school system. But as a current parent of very young children, if I just send my kids to school and have them come home and that's it, I don't think my children would be doing as well as they are. And I have the privilege to have access to the time and the resources and the knowledge and the courage to just ask and not stop asking until I get the answer. But a lot of families, for a lot of different reasons, don't have that. And so I really feel like we have these same conversations over and over, not just here in MCPS or Montgomery County, but across the nation, right, for decades and decades before I was even born. And it's because we're not bridging that gap between what happens in the classroom and what happens at home, and figuring out ways as a society to make sure that those resource allocation is not just confined to the classroom, because that's not enough. Especially when we're talking about the opportunity gaps and things like that. And there's a reason why we see the same groups of students over and over. It's because we're not going further enough, right? And that has to be kind of a community effort, not just here in the school system. So I think I would really like to also figure out, knowing that that can have such an impact on the measurable things that we're going to do in this committee and in this school system and this board, how can we try to bridge that gap? Because without providing that, whether it's teaching our parents how to do Common Core math so that they can help. I never learned Common Core math. What was that? It took me a while. And now that I kind of get it, the kids are like on to the next thing, right? Right. But, if we can do some of those things and maybe capitalize on the time we have over the summer to help with that, then we set up our children and our families for success, as well as our educators, because they're just in there spinning their wheels if those things are not being, kind of repeated or reaffirmed right at home.
To add to that, there's something that I call the tutoring gap. Actually, my son is home right now from grad school, and he's picked up some students to help them get through their assessments before they go on break. And a couple of them were at risk of failing, but after having a few sessions, they're much better off. It just came back to me about how that extra time, one-on-one attention could really make a difference for so many kids. And so I would love to see, as part of our strategic plan, how can we identify resources and where to aim those resources? Again, I know we track every child. I've been in those meetings where leaders get together and they look at data and they look at test scores and where there are opportunities to improve. And I don't think I've heard about our tutoring program as a system in a very long time, not since COVID. So that is a place where we could look at how to use that to achieve some of these objectives too.
So thank you. So what you all have shared is very helpful. It's not necessarily the target conversation. However, it is exactly where we will be heading in our future conversations, which is highlighting what are the intentional strategies and tactics we're putting in place to support ensuring that we are meeting these goals and objectives identified in the strategic plan. If the web team could pull up the strategic plan for us, we're going to look at a scorecard. I'm going to ask you my next question.
Can I, Dr. Addison, I
yeah,
apologize.
sure.
Before you move on to that, I appreciate that. You're right. It didn't completely answer the question that you were trying to get at, but I guess my point with that is that so often I feel like sometimes we set ourselves up to fail because we don't recognize that there's so many more factors
Yes.
impacting this than just what's happening in that classroom in that 45-minute class
Yes.
for students who have 7 to 8 periods, right? And so when you talk about the ambition, right, well, we're really setting unrealistic expectations for our system, for our educators, for our students, for our families about what we expect to happen because we're not considering all of the factors that go into that, right? This is not a perfectly theoretical controlled environment where, well, we gave you a great curriculum, you
Yes.
have a great teacher, you're in a safe classroom. Well, how come it's not happening? Well, because there's 10 different other things going on, right? And so that's why I just want to make it, clear that it's not that. I don't think any of us is meaning to kind of circumvent the goal or the question there, but it's that this is not happening in a vacuum. And so I think that's where you find that dissonance,
Yes.
right, between what we want to be doing and what is actually feasible is because we sometimes are not being realistic about what we're operating in.
No, and please don't take my response to indicate that I definitely wanted you to share your target thinking. Where you all headed is exactly why we have this intentionality of taking our time in terms of establishing the targets. We need to recognize what are those intentional strategies and tactics. And to your point, we don't want to hop out there and identify targets when we do not yet have a full understanding of all the factors that we need to take into consideration. So there is intentionality around this kind of slow pace and walk through in terms of identifying what our targets are.
So before we go on, just to get a little bit to your point, we should probably see where we have done well and as far as growth goes already, to see how far we could push, if that makes sense. Because, if we have, let's just say if there's a particular program that's working really well, a particular school, and they really came out on all cylinders, and they were able to show an improvement in one of these areas by 10%, right? Then we know, okay, maybe that is a goal, right? Or how much more do you want to push beyond that? So just kind of look back and see what we have been able to achieve in the past. I know there were some programs implemented way before I was on the board. I think one of them was at Highland Elementary School. They had some kind of, they had a special program there. It took a lot of resources, but it worked. And how far were they able to improve? So there should be kind of a look back to see what we have been able to do, and then use that as kind of a starting point to know what our goals should be. I don't know if anyone else has something to say about that kind of goal setting.
I do. It's a little bit like what she was going to say, I think, in that are we trying to set a target, or do we want to set a growth module, so to speak, so that we're looking for growth instead of saying, okay, 95%. That may not be realistic because it depends on where you started. So maybe we should set a target that deals with just growth, so we see some progression. So at the end of 5 years, we might be at something. But here's my other question. We're talking about a target for this, and they're getting ready to change the math standard. So how are we overlaying? We don't know what that's going to look like. Is this baseline data even going to be useful? Or is it just something for the year, and then next year we have to start over?
So these are all great questions, and this is why this is a great conversation related to our district strategic plan. So the first place, and I'm going to answer all of your questions and kind of hit on them. The first piece, I do want to remind us that this is the start of this new strategic plan this school year. And so our look back, our starting point, like where are we starting the school year? We're using our baseline data. How did we end last school year, the 24-25 school year, as a preliminary understanding of the performance of our students, because we're focused right now on academic excellence as goal 1. To your point, Ms. Wolf, there are things that are changing. We recognize that there are some things that are changing. Some, regardless of how they change, we still would be able to compare to our baseline data. So for example, the state is talking about changing aspects of the Maryland School Report Card, but they're still going to have that system of identifying stars. So we would still be able to compare for our first goal and objective, the percent of our students that are doing 4 stars or higher. So we would be able to compare. In some instances, we might need to reset our baseline depending on how much that performance metric has changed. So when we think about mathematics standards, if there are aspects, for example, of our district assessments that change so much that it's not appropriate to compare from one year to the next, then that might be an opportunity where we're going to say for this 25-26 school year, or whatever year we have that shift, that we want to reset our norm. So that's one of the benefits and values of having a public-facing kind of fluid and being very transparent in terms of what are we engaging in as it relates to some of these performance metrics. One of the other things I will tell you as we're engaging in the cross-divisional conversations related to baseline data is a compliment regarding the scorecards, because as you look at it, sometimes, we talk about it from an educator lens. Like, you might look at that performance metric and say, well, what exactly does this percentage mean? And so we're going to have a complement that helps us, define for the community kind of what we're looking at. And so those instances where we might need to reset baseline, we'll be able to publicly indicate that as well.
I guess I was wondering, and this is just musings, as they say, if they change the standard in some way, shape, or form, won't we have to allow time for our teachers to be trained in whatever it is the new model? And so that's why I'm wondering, is the baseline really going to be fair, let's say?
Yes.
Is it going to be fair to the teachers and the students?
That's a good
And that's just a thought. I
Yes.
know you don't have an answer.
Yeah, no, I'm
for
writing it
that.
down.
Thank you.
All right. So on the screen is our scorecard for Goal 1. And if we could scroll to Objective 4, as that's the one we're going to focus on in a minute, I just want you to look at the baseline data that is indicated. You see the MCAP Mathematics, which is the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program in Mathematics. And what you see there is the percentage of all of our students across all grades who met the state expectation of proficiency. You also see a percentage for mathematics, and you also see percentages related to required district assessments. Now, again, when we're talking about targets, one of the things, and again, I want to go back to what Ms. Montoya elevated in terms of the number of factors that weigh in on determining targets. One of the other aspects that we need to think about with our targets is what is our 2030 goal with regard to targets? Because ideally, you want to back map statistically those targets incrementally. So for Objective 1, for example, when we think of the Maryland School Report Card, the superintendent said by 2030, all of our schools will be a 4-star or higher. So that's 100% in 2030. And right now we're at 53.5. And so we could incrementally do that towards 2030. When we think about our state expectations, this is where we want to think about what percentage in 2030 are we looking for our students to demonstrate proficiency, and then back map that. Ms. Montoya, I see you have your light on.
Yeah, just with Objective 4, but that's looking at the entire district, right?
Yes, yes.
So,
Because our strategic plan is the district view.
and I recognize that, but
Yes.
it just, I mean, one, the district is just huge, right?
Yes.
This is not a small district where there's like, oh, there's 10 schools between
Yes.
elementary, high school, and middle, right?
Yes.
And so, not that we want to go like school by school or even cluster by cluster, but it just seems like recognizing I was part of the group that put this together, okay, and I didn't say this at the time, that I just wonder if it would lend itself to breaking it down at least by maybe elementary, middle, and high school, or even parsing out elementary with K through 2 and 3 through 5. Because, maybe we're doing it really well in 3 through 5. And maybe we're not doing so well in, 9 through 12. And then it kind of really is skewing that data. And that also then allows us to really hone in as a district on, wow, we really need to bump up K through 2 or something like that, right? While still looking at the overall district, of course.
Yes.
But again, when we talk about curriculums and all those things, that does, seem to be how we kind of parse things out.
No, and that is great because it actually addresses the question where I was heading in terms of, how should we be thinking about that? And what you elevated, which you don't see on the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program mathematics row, you just see the overall district. But for district assessments, we do show overall, and then we show it by level. So there is an opportunity for us with the state assessment to also break it down in that same manner to address.
Right, because it would be good to
elevated.
see the comparison and to see kind of if there's any patterns. Are they close enough, right? We always talk about, I know as a parent, I see the test scores, and then you want to look at the grades, and I kind of want them to be similar.
Yes,
When
yes.
they're not similar, I start to get a little concerned. And so I think, when we're talking maybe a percentage point or two,
Right.
okay, no big deal. But if you're looking at mathematics is 48%, and then if the high school is 38%, well, that's a little different. But maybe it's not 48% for high school, but we don't know because it's, again, as a whole.
Yes, no, thank you. Other thoughts?
Building on that, this is great to have this objective, very plain, easy to see, one objective, but then to break that down underneath, almost as a subset of that objective. I mean, it could even, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, clickable, right?
Yes.
Kind of like the budget that we just got, there's artifacts you can look at. Maybe that we could have something like that. Also, to see where we can target some resources. Are there particular groups of kids that we should target to get more resources there. And so that's when we get into disaggregate information. And again, it could be kind of part of our strategic plan, but just not the overlay. It would be underneath. So
Yes,
don't
no,
know.
thank you. And when we were in the process of establishing the strategic plan, we talked about the opportunity to be able to see results disaggregated by student groups. And so we definitely need to enhance and update so that that opportunity is available.
that would be really helpful. Okay, I think we can go on.
All right, thank you. If we could go back to the slide deck, please. And, all right, so at last Thursday's full Board of Education meeting, we shared baseline data aligned with the various goals and objectives of our Future Ready strategic plan. Under Goal 1, Academic Excellence, specifically Objective 4, which is related to proficiency and growth in mathematics. This includes the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, or MCAP, proficiency results, as well as some early progress monitoring data from district assessments. Together, these data provide insight into where students are performing well and where there are challenges. We also examine differences across grade levels and student groups. These baseline data help us identify both system-wide strengths and priority areas for targeted intervention. So this slide serves as a transition. It's a zoom in on our Objective 4, emphasizing that baseline data are not simply descriptive, but actionable. And these anchor our target setting that we just talked about in terms of where we're heading. They guide our instructional priorities and help inform decisions about where to deploy supports. They also establish a common understanding of where we are starting as we implement this strategic plan. This slide provides a detailed look at Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program mathematics proficiency across grade levels over multiple years. And so we see incremental gains in several grades. And to Ms. Montoya's point, when you look at it separately instead of all in one, overall, you see differences across different grade level and grade level spans. At the same time, our overall proficiency rates remain an area of concern, particularly when you look at some of those middle school grades. These results underscore the cumulative nature of where we see instructional learning and the importance of early and sustained instructional supports. On this slide is what we provided as part of our Progress 1 monitoring data for high school mathematics. Overall, and this shows a comparison of marking period 1 from last school year to marking period 1 of this school year. And overall, we see improvement compared to the prior year, including gains among several student groups. However, there still are some disparities in performance for some of our student groups, particularly our emergent multilingual learners or recently exited multilingual learners, our students receiving farm services. And so I am now going to turn it to Dr. Stephanie Brandt to share more about secondary mathematics strategies in alignment with our strategic plan goal and objective related to mathematics.
May I ask for a quick clarification about the mathematics by grade tested?
Yes.
Because, you know, once you start getting into the upper level math, it gets tricky because there's like 3 different maths your 6th grader could be in, depending on, are they in grade level math? Did they on-ramp to accelerated in elementary? Did they on-ramp to accelerated in middle? And so it's really confusing because I know that because I have a 6th grader. When I see math 6, I'm like, well, what does that even mean? I have no idea what we mean when we say math 6, 7, and 8 because there's so many different ones. And then even with algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, that's what's going to end up getting mixed, I think, to Ms. Wolf's point, right? That's going to become 2 classes instead of 3, I think. So can you just explain that just a little bit so that I know who's being tested when I look at that number?
And I appreciate you asking that question for clarity because I definitely should have taken some time to identify that these are the labels and naming convention from the state. So while we in MCPS have multiple courses that a student in the 6th grade can take, the state says, if you're in the you're in the sixth grade, this is the state assessment you take that are grounded in the Common Core standards related to mathematics for students in grade 6.
Okay, so the kids that took compacted math in elementary and now they're in that accelerated course in 6th grade, the kids that just started accelerated, 6+?
Yes.
In 6th grade, the kids that maybe are already in algebra, but they're in 6th grade, they're all gonna take the MCAP at the end of the 6th grade year, and that's that number.
Almost all of those students take it. The students who are in algebra would take the algebra state assessment. But
So when would they have taken the 6th grade? They just skip that?
there's
Oh, that's interesting. And how does that, maybe that's a whole different meeting conversation. But the way, I'm just wondering about the impact of that on the data.
Yes.
In terms of being reflective, because really, if those kids who were in algebra took this 6th grade test, let's presume they would score high,
Right.
and perhaps our data would be
Yes.
higher and more reflective of the kids that are actually in grade 6.
And we definitely will need to engage in that more detailed conversation.
Right.
We'll come back about that.
Thank
one.
you.
Yes.
I just wanted to add on to that. It makes it particularly confusing because Math 7, you see a pretty big drop. I know 7th grade is the start of the bigger cohort taking algebra.
Yes.
Very few 6th graders take algebra, a couple, right? So
Yes.
it might affect it some, but then
Yes.
7th, you have a bigger cohort. And then 8th, you have even a bigger cohort,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you see that precipitous drop. So,
That is what you see on this slide. And while on this slide we don't have numbers, we can send that to you. But there is definitely an impact in terms of, particularly in the middle school, the number of our students who are enrolled in algebra who are taking that algebra state assessment. And we have, our district historical approach to algebra by grade 8 is a lot of where we have many fewer students enrolled in that grade 8 course to take the state Math 8 assessment.
I think what might help us is to know how many children actually took the test in each of these levels.
Yes, and we can send that to you after.
That would be great.
Is it possible to just update the slide with that, and then we can just post it on board docs so that the community can also see? Just to update it with how many students took the test, just that one slide.
The only reason I was pausing is because we have 3 years there, so it might be better to add in a separate slide for each of the, because we might run out of real estate. But
Okay.
yes, we can definitely do that.
And it doesn't have to be urgent or anything, obviously, we're all getting ready to go in for the holidays.
Good morning, Ms. Stewart, Ms. Montoya, and Ms. Wolf. Thanks for having us here today. This slide highlights why mathematics is such a critical leverage point in our strategic planning work. High school math, in particular, has an impact on student outcomes because these courses are both required for graduation, but are foundational for college and career readiness. We're certainly encouraged by the upward trends we're seeing in both the FY25 MCAP results and the FY26 Q1 district assessment data. While the gains are uneven, they indicate that targeted instructional efforts can move performance when they are implemented with fidelity. Mathematics is also cumulative, by nature, and so gaps that emerge early tend to compound over time, and that actually really speaks to, Ms. Montoya, your last comment, which is why consistent instruction and timely intervention are so important, especially when you consider those students, in courses like Algebra 1. Another key point here is the role of district assessments. They are not just accountability measures. They are tools we can use to establish baselines, monitor progress throughout the year, and guide instructional support at the school and classroom levels. Taken together, this slide reinforces that advancing mathematics proficiency is not a single initiative. It requires sustained focus, aligned instruction, and ongoing monitoring to ensure students are building the skills they need for post-secondary success. Next slide, please. This slide visually represents how we're organizing our instructional priorities and accountability structures to improve all academic outcomes, but for the sake of this conversation, to improve mathematics outcomes. Dr. Moran actually spoke to this last Thursday during our time together here with you all. At the center is a continuous improvement cycle that connects what happens in classrooms to system-level support. You know, we begin with classroom instruction and student learning. That's where really the work lives. Through observations, MCAP informative assessments, and student work, we're really identifying patterns in instruction and learning. Those patterns then inform coordinated supports through cross-functional teams, ensuring that schools receive aligned guidance rather than disconnected interventions. Professional learning is intentionally embedded in this cycle. It is responsive to what we see in classrooms and assessment performance and really grounded in the curriculum and instructional expectations. This includes supports for teachers, instructional leaders, and administrators so that everyone is working from a shared understanding of high-quality mathematics instruction. Accountability is built into the cycle through progress monitoring and the use of school improvement plans. Schools use multiple data sources to reflect on progress, adjust instruction, and refine supports throughout the year. Overall, this visual reinforces that improving mathematics performance is not about a single action or program. It's about creating a coherent system where instruction, support, professional learning, and accountability are tightly connected and continuously informing one another. Next slide, please. This slide really captures what we're learning from our cross-functional teams' work with schools. Over the course of this year, a significant number of math-related support incidents have been documented, and we're documenting them through our use of KickUp, which is a monitoring tool, particularly at the high school level. In response, the system has provided extensive hands-on, really instructional assistance and support to schools. As we look across the work, several instructional patterns stand out. We're seeing challenges related to pacing, especially in content-heavy courses. There's also some variation in how instructional materials are being used and in the level of student engagement with grade-level content. These insights have helped us focus our support in a few key areas. We're prioritizing stronger mathematics instruction, better integration of English language development within math classrooms, and professional learning that's directly tied to classroom practice. The most important takeaway from this slide is that these learnings they're not theoretical. They're grounded in real classrooms and real requests for support. The cross-functional teams, coaching, and school-based collaboration are really enabling us to respond strategically and consistently, using what we learn to refine our instructional approach continuously. Next slide, please. This slide extends the cross-functional team learnings by showing how we're responding instructionally, particularly in core mathematics courses. Classroom observations, especially in Algebra 1, have given us a clear picture of what students are experiencing day to day. One consistent strength we're seeing is student engagement. Students are participating, classrooms feel supportive, and there is a strong sense of belonging. At the same time, the observations really have shown that there are some areas where instructional practices really need strengthening. In many classrooms, we see inconsistent use of the adopted curriculum and limited evidence of instruction being driven by true intended learning outcomes. In some cases, the focus shifts to task completion rather than ensuring that students develop a deep understanding of mathematical concepts. Our response is targeted and actionable. We're refining and implementing an illustrative math curriculum observation tool to capture better, what high-quality mathematics instruction looks like. We're also working to align instructional expectations across schools to ensure a shared understanding of effective practice. Finally, we're using the observation data intentionally to guide coaching conversations and professional learning. The goal is not evaluation, but growth, supporting teachers and instructional leaders to strengthen core mathematics instruction in ways that directly improve student learning. Next slide, please. Earlier, Dr. Addison spoke to strategies and tactics. And this slide really brings together the concrete actions we're taking in response to what we've learned from the data, classrooms observations, and the work that cross-functional teams are currently doing. The strategies outlined here are already underway and are focused on improving both instructional practice and student outcomes. On the instructional side, we're emphasizing coaching, collaborative planning, and purposeful observations. These actions are designed to support teachers in strengthening lesson design, pacing, and the use of instructional materials aligned to grade level standards. At the student level, interventions are being more intentionally aligned to diagnostic and progress monitoring data. This ensures that supports are timely, targeted, and responsive to student need rather than reactive. We're also strengthening teacher and leader capacity through professional learning that is directly connected to school improvement efforts. This includes instructional leadership development and opportunities for teams to analyze data and refine practice together. Finally, we are deepening our progress monitoring structures. Data cycles, checkpoints, and feedback loops are helping schools continuously assess impact and adjust instruction throughout the year. Family engagement is included as a key strategy, recognizing that support for mathematics learning extends beyond the classroom, which really, relates to what Ms. Montoya shared earlier. Overall, this slide emphasizes that improving mathematics performance requires coordinated, sustained action, not isolated strategies. And that, really the system is aligning its resources to support that work. I'll now turn things over to Dr. Genevieve Floyd. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
I think this is a good place for
Sure, of
questions,
course,
because these
yeah.
were some really meaty slides, actually. And I appreciate everything that you've shared. My first question, and then we'll go on to my colleagues, are we talked about slide 13. A couple questions I had. You talked about math interventions. What can you describe those interventions? And then also with family engagement, a similar question. What particular strategies have we
Sure.
tried?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So when it comes to the interventions, we are currently in a place, especially around math. So we will release a pre-K to 12 mathematics intervention RFP, just like we did for literacy in the last couple of years. So the interventions that we are providing to teachers for really, it's really around adapting classroom instruction and really providing some reteaching opportunities for students. It's more, the tier 1 instruction is what all students receive. It's more of that tier 2 instruction for students. What can you do with those small groups? When I use the word intervention, I'm really thinking about how we use our current curricular products to reteach, to use that assessment data so that we ensure that more students are meeting those standards. We will have more intentional, interventions that we can, really put into place for our secondary learners. We have some that we currently put into place, but they're more for students who are receiving special education services currently. So I do appreciate that question. So when I think of interventions now, we're being really strategic in coaching around that tier 2 time for this small group, reteaching, and or when we notice a pattern of a student, or a group of students making the same error, right? And so, teachers are really spending a little bit more time in that space, and that's often discussed during that collaborative planning time that I mentioned as well. when it comes to the family engagement, I can specifically speak to even just as recent as last night. So I was actually toggling between the budget presentation and the NAACP parent meeting. And it was at that meeting that I was joined by a parent who's doing this work in her community and also our IXL representative. And we presented to our families the way in which they could support their students over winter break. There is a parent on that committee who really has done an incredible job. I should really connect you all with her. She's like a model parent of using IXL at home. And so we know that all of our secondary students during mathematics, have the IXL as a supplement. And so we were encouraging families to continue the usage of IXL over winter break. And really just asking them, do you see it as homework? Do you, and so that's the engagement where you mentioned tutoring earlier. And while IXL is not tutoring, it certainly, we intentionally have student map scores, within IXL so that a student profile is created and a plan for individual students is then created to really address any gaps in their learning that they have around the standards. Classroom teachers can also, create opportunities for them in IXL to, really practice some of what's being taught in classrooms. And so that is certainly just one instance of a conversation that we've had. We're also going out into the community. We just 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, we had our second math policy community meeting, and really that is centered around the MSD math policy, but the impact on parents and what that means for them. So there are a couple of different ways we're engaging families in a unique and really intentional way. And so to me, that purpose really does support a strategy of really just engaging in a different way.
So just as a quick follow-up, I guess for both of my questions, I would love to have in the future maybe someone come to a meeting and talk about a particular intervention that showed some improvements, right? And that we can learn from them, because I think there's so much good work being done in individual classrooms, individual schools, and we don't, as a board, always hear about it. And then we could think about that as we're working on our budgets, right? Where can we accelerate some of our interventions, our engagement practices, so that we can, spread the wealth. And I would love to do some of that work with this committee. And so I really appreciate you letting me know about some of the interventions, and also that we are going to have an RFP. So we can have this across all of our schools. So I appreciate that. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation so far. My question is, you talked a lot about what you're doing for the teacher. It's not clear to me what we're doing for the actual student. So, Laura just asked you about the instructional strategies. I'd like to know, if you had to name one, which one is really showing promise? Because I can't tell. I mean, we're doing a lot of work with the teachers, but we're not seeing any improvement. So somewhere we've got to identify a strategy that actually works. Do we know which one? Because if a teacher has 23 kids, how are they focusing on any one kid?
Thank you for that question. I do believe that a true instructional strategy right now is the work of those cross-functional team instructional specialists in mathematics. And the reason that I say that is because they are in schools every day on the ground modeling for teachers, right? So when we think about, that student, while we can consider the conversations that we have with teachers, you're exactly right. It's hard to know if those conversations truly translate into classrooms. And so when those cross-functional team instructional specialists are in the classroom side by side, it's that feedback loop that I spoke to during that visual, right? Where they're in classrooms doing observations, modeling, modeling, providing, yes, it's feedback to teachers, but it's truly with a student sitting right there. So it really, when I think about a strategy, it truly is that side-by-side work, and it could really look like modeling, right? Where they're modeling for a teacher, but truly then teaching the student during that time.
But it's not translating into improvement. I'm trying to see whether or not the team has identified any strategy that they could carry across other schools.
I do want to just add as a reminder related to our cross-functional teams that this is our first year. So we have that opportunity to continue to learn and understand. So we're not yet at a place to say kind of what are those intentional things. We're seeing early promise in terms of their implementation, but I do know that we are seeking to obtain feedback and understanding more in terms of what are those intentional supports and strategies. And then as we get to the end of this year, I think we have the opportunity to see what has impacted our outcomes for students, particularly in mathematics.
So you talked about uneven implementation of math instruction. What's your evidence for that? What are you looking at? How do you know it's uneven instruction?
Thank you for that question. That truly is those observations, those purposeful observations that are being done in classrooms. And so we're really looking at the evidence of those observations, and that's how we are designing professional learning for both school leaders and teachers, and also even the time that we spend, especially at the high school level, with our content resource teachers, so the math resource teachers, really designing that monthly time with them as a result of what we're seeing in classrooms.
Okay, my final question is, if you don't have the same team going to every school, how are you comparing uneven? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while we don't have the same team going to each school, we have been really intentional with the time we spend with those teams. And so every single Friday, those cross-functional teams are getting together. They're getting together with the Division of School Support and Leadership, with that cross-functional team. So if I were a director that supported schools, my entire team's getting together, which includes all of the contents, special education, DMA, but then also in the afternoons, I can tell you I'm a part of those content then, instructional specialist team meetings. And so we get all of the math CFT instructional specialists together, on Friday afternoons, and we really talk about the work that they're doing in classrooms, what they're seeing. And so while every single team isn't exactly the same because the instructional specialists are all different, we do have some real intentional, time with them to decrease variance in the work that they're doing.
Thank you. I'll look forward to hearing about the promising strategies at the end of the school year.
So first, I just want to say thank you for all of this work that you've put together here, because I was eagerly waiting to figure out what is the plan for math. In addition to facilities, math scores keep me up at night because they are not good, and they have not been good for Black and Latino children for quite some time, before my kids were even in the school system. And again, as having two little kids, I know how much work it takes for them. You're basically reteaching the math lesson sometimes in the evening, right? And so just know that all of my questions are kind of in that context of like lived experience. And so I guess a couple things. I just want to first clarify for myself. So at the elementary school level, you're saying that we do have math interventions through the curricula available to teachers? Because I've heard from some teachers that they've tried to get that, but MCPS maybe didn't buy those. And unfortunately, that happens sometimes here at MCPS. So I just want to make sure that if we do have that available, that our teachers know.
So we do have math, and we do have them at the secondary level. It's just a little bit different in the programming. We do have math interventions that are available. There are not as many of them. And so, we have a lot more literacy options just as a result of that RFP that we did, and then the contracts that we currently have as a result of that that we did procure at the end of last school year. So we will have, our hope is to have more robust and just more of those math interventions. We do have that fit time right now that every single elementary school is implementing for this school year, and that's that 30-minute chunk of time where students are receiving some of those interventions. But I do believe that you're going to hear that they're receiving more literacy interventions during that time because we have a lot more literacy interventions available.
Right, but I think I'm talking about the math curricula. Like there
sure.
are tools with, when you buy the curricula, right, it comes with, yes,
Yeah.
your books, but there's then these little like add-ons
Yeah,
perhaps,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Did we not purchase those at the elementary school level in terms of the curricula-based interventions or tools?
We do, within Eureka, there is an intervention that we have purchased. I think that who you're hearing from are a variety of teachers who are looking for another layer, right? So more of like a tier 3 intervention. The tier 2 intervention that comes from Eureka is more for the small group reteaching. So I do believe what you're hearing is tier 3, and we're hearing the same thing, which is why we really are releasing that RFP. But there is
Okay, so the RFP is going to be for, so we recognize that this is an issue, and then now we're taking an action. There's an RFP either coming out or is going to, okay, great. That's all I want to know, is that we're doing something about it. And then, just for the community's clarification, because I love IXL. My kids do it at home, and I'm like, oh, you want screen time? Great, let's get on IXL. Map time is coming up, right? The reason I love IXL is because it's tied to the curriculum, right? And I think that was something that I know you know that, and that's why we use it in all of those things, but the community may not realize, right? It's not just another math app or something like that. It's, if you move, you can change your state, and it will tie it to your state's curriculum for a variety of subjects. So it is a really great tool. And the question I have, and perhaps you don't know, or this might not be your area, is why don't we have it available to elementary schools? Because, again, in my lived experience, if they're not they don't have a strong foundation and grasp of the concepts at that age, I mean, it's just all backpiling then, right? Once they get into middle school and even upper elementary, really, when things start to get more complex. And I know that some elementary schools have access to it from like their PTA, perhaps, maybe buys a contract. And I have to wonder if that's why some elementary schools have higher scores than others. That's not all of the factors, of course. But I'm just wondering why we don't have it for elementary, and if we can get a cost estimate for including that. And again, perhaps not from you, but if we can just request from staff to follow up on that, please.
Sure. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. You're exactly right. IXL is directly connected to the standards and to the grade level standards. And I can get you a quote. I am the contact person that could do that at the elementary level.
Great.
Our elementary instructional block is a little bit different than the secondary instructional block. There's a little bit more flexibility at the secondary level. When you get into middle school, I was not in this position when we procured IXL years ago, but I certainly can get you more information. And
Because I hear a lot of other Zern and all these
Sure.
things, and so we're obviously letting the kids use math apps, which, whatever gets them across the finish line. But if we are, then why not use something that could actually perhaps translate into some growth, right, in terms of our testing? And then I have to wonder, we talk about class sizes. And I admittedly am doing my own research on the impact of class size reductions or increases and what's meaningful, what's not, right? But I also know from my lived experience that my children, one of them specifically, had an opportunity because of the makeup of the class. There was the teacher, a special education teacher, and a paraeducator. And it was like the best class they were in their whole life, because they were able to parse out into groups and rotations and all of these things. And it was almost like a college, level size class, right? Those seminar groups we all had where there's like 10 people. And so I just have to wonder, and perhaps maybe not at the elementary level, I don't know, but at these higher levels where things are much more complex, is that a space where we should be looking at perhaps there would be a meaningful impact with class size reduction in our math courses, especially if we have children who are still also trying to learn how to speak English while also taking some of these advanced math courses. And I'm just wondering whether that has been explored what that could look like to explore. So I think I'm also looking to my staff to see about, class size reduction in the sense of math specifically. And then, sorry, my final question, because I am also on the Special Populations Committee, and obviously we see the scores and things as well. There's that overlap. Is there at any point where we, whether it's formally or informally, almost screen for things like dyscalculia or ADHD, where children can sometimes have a hard time with the spatial organization, whether it's geometry from actual shapes and angles, or just lining up your numbers correctly so you can multiply them properly? You can know the formula, but if the numbers are jumbled in your head, you're never going to be able to get where you need to be. And I just have to wonder if some of that may be reflected. And then those are those factors where no matter what plan we set, no matter what goals we set, how much we instruct the teachers, that child is never going to be able to get what they need because there's another significant factor there.
That's a great question. Not that I know of, is there a space where we formally, I'm sure that there are informal, observations of students. I do know that as a result of the MSD literacy policy, there is now a screener that's put into place that really does look at dyslexia. So I wonder about that math policy that's currently, being rolled out by the state. I can certainly do a little research on my own, and get some information back to you. But it certainly is something that we could explore.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I'm very aware of the new requirements, for literacy. I have some arguments about whether it should be at third grade or earlier, but that's separate. But yeah, there isn't anything for math, and we just, as a society, seem to kind of just accept that, like, oh, I'm just not good at math. Well, no. If you said you weren't good at reading, we wouldn't say, okay, well, you're just not good at reading, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
+1 on the not good at math comment. I think we all can be good at math. I'm a true believer of that. And so just quickly, I wanted to go back to slide 8 that had some of our progress data, and thinking back to our last meeting, I just wanted to see, this is comparing marking period 1, 2024, to marking period 1, 2025. Is that apples to apples?
It's not apples to apples because it's not the same exact student. However, it is the exact same assessment.
Okay. So exact same assessment, but with different, right, exactly. Okay. So there are some interesting points on here, and I just wanted to know from staff, is there any learnings from this particular slide about maybe where we had some success and why you think that was? Or do you think this is not enough data to really determine success or not, or some success? Yes.
If I could I want to make sure I understand what's on here first. So this is the grades the kids got after the first marking period for each year, not test scores.
This
Because it says district assessments. I just want to make sure.
This is district assessment, and so in our district, we have an expected target score that we want students to hit to say that they are achieving the expectation that we would want them to achieve for the district assessment. So this slide represents what % of those students across the grade levels are hitting that expected score in the course that they're in on that required district assessment.
Right, but what are they doing so that someone knows if they got the score? Like if I'm in math class, right, this is not MAP, this is not MCAP, this is my quarter 1 end of quarter test? Or how? Or is this my grade? Like I got a B?
This is not the grade.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out when someone's looking at this.
It is the district assessment. So if I am in Algebra 1 and there is a required district assessment in marking period 1 for Algebra 1. And
end of module 5, whatever.
Yes. Okay. And then let's say the expected score is a 75. What % of those students who are in that course hit that 75 or higher?
Okay, so some kids in this group got an A, some got a B, some got a C, C+.
Correct.
But they all met this proficiency.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So and the reason I asked was because in 2025, so this would be this first quarter?
Yes.
Okay. So, and the reason I ask is because we also had the new grading regulation.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear here too, that the kids that are meeting it, because we do see some increases in some groups, and they did that under the new
Yes.
grading guidelines, which arguably may have been more challenging depending on how they treated some of these last year.
So let me.
Just in terms of growth, right? That we're seeing an increase, but also that potentially it was a more, how can I say, like rigorous grading?
Yeah, so I
Not
just,
necessarily for the district assessment. And we didn't bring the grades performance here as part of the progress monitoring, but that is in our progress monitoring
Okay.
document from the strategic plan presentation we did, where you can see the performance of students, actual grade earned in that course. So that is
Okay.
more of what I'm hearing you share in term, which would be more reflective of the impact of the grading
Okay.
policy.
So this would be like the end of module
Yes.
test. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
so I need to get to my colleague. I have this question, so if we could just do one example, and then we can dig deeper in another time.
Well, on this slide, I do notice the increase in success for our emergent multilingual learners, and so I do wonder, right? I do wonder around some of the work that's being done, and I do wonder about some of those instructional specialists that I know I continue to kind of hammer on. But I know that when they are in classrooms with teachers, they are often focused on some of our students in those special populations.
Okay, great, because I do want to hold up, when we do have some success, it's really important that we acknowledge that, and so that we can realize, oh, this might be a strategy that is working, but I want to make sure that this data is telling me what I think it's telling me, because often there's something else going on. So I'd like to dig into some of those opportunities as we move on in this committee.
Absolutely. And when I looked at that kick-up data, I did see a pattern of support to our emergent multilingual learners.
Okay.
So I did notice that. And so I do believe, it is still really early, right? It is only December. We've only implemented these teams for, almost 2 marking periods, but really 1 marking period. So we'll continue to bring you updates.
Okay, great. Okay.
I have 2 questions. A lot of this focused on the cross-functional teams. I want to know how we are evaluating the cross-functional team. That's the first question. And the second one is, how are we understanding the return on investment?
That's a great question. So not only are we having those cross-functional team instructional specialists give us really the input of how they spend their time through the use of Kick-Up, but we're also asking schools, right, about the effectiveness of their time and the work that they're doing with them. And so coupled together, we really should, have an understanding of the quality of the work that they're spending and the impact. We're constantly asking those instructional specialists around impact, but we're also speaking to principals around that as well.
But you're asking the school of which they're attached to, right? In other words, they're self-evaluating, right?
Right, and we're also going in and, observing as well those purposeful observations. So members from our team and, a couple of other teams are working collaboratively together to go in and observe as well.
So shouldn't part of the evaluation be if math grades are going up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to understand the return on investment here.
And just to bridge the return on investment aspect, because it's been cutting across a number of the committees, fiscal management, policy management, as well as here. And while evaluation of cross-functional teams is not an official project on our program evaluation agenda, we do have an opportunity to leverage and use that information to be able to bring it to different groups around that ROF framework that we're in the process of developing.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure they're not self-evaluating, that somebody on the outside is looking in.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. We have about 50 minutes. I think we can do it.
Good morning, board members. If you go, yes, thank you so much. I am Genevieve Floyd. I'm the director of the Department of College and Career Readiness. And under that heading, there are a variety of programmatic opportunities for our students, such as career and technical education, as well as dual enrollment. And there's the responsibility to make sure, as it relates to blueprint legislation, Pillar 3 specifically, that information is shared, that I work collaboratively with colleagues in the Office of Shared Accountability, Curriculum, Technology Office, and counseling to make sure that we're all aware and schools are supported as it relates to the requirement under this legislation. With that, you can go to the next slide. In the next couple of slides, what we hope to do is share with you an overview of the blueprint legislation, Pillar 3 specifically. As you know, it's a massive legislation, so we're not going to do a deep dive, but certainly want to level set to make sure that we understand the objectives therein, which includes an overview of the newly revised CCR standards that have just been approved by MSDE, which incorporates a variety of assessments, career and technical education opportunities, college credit, and the alignment with the pathways that we have to offer in schools. Next slide. So at a very high level, Pillar 3 is considered the North Star of the blueprint legislation, and there are 4 primary objectives. Objective 1 really relates to the instructional system, curriculum, and ensuring that across the state that there is rigorous curriculum in place, as well as standards to determine if students are college and career ready or not. It is the standards part of this objective that we're going to focus on in the next few slides. However, I do want to mention Objective 2, which focuses on monitoring and supporting students towards progress to being CCR, as well as being on track to graduate high school. And the two are not the same. Many of our students, or students can across the state, graduate high school without being deemed college and career ready. Objective 3 focuses on support and post-CCR pathways. Those post-CCR pathways, I'm sure you're familiar with, include advanced placement, IB, CTE, or career technical education, and dual enrollment. It is the expectation that if students are deemed to be college and career ready by the end of grade 10, that they are to be provided access to those post-CCR pathways at no cost. And then finally, the 4th objective within Pillar 3 focuses on high-quality CTE programs and career counseling. We, within MCPS, we provide 51 different CTE programs of study. That work is going to be redesigned based on some decisions that have been made by the state, and there is going to be a redesign that's implemented in 27-28. The latter part of that objective, career counseling, well, the language in the blueprint legislation says counseling. We say advising. Initially, when we began to socialize this work, individuals would confuse counseling with counselor, and this work is not their work, so we use the term advising. And it is the expectation per this objective that all LEAs partner with their local workforce development board. For us, that's WorkSource Montgomery, as well as their community college, and for us, that's Montgomery College, to implement a counseling or career advising opportunity to all secondary students, so grades 6 through 12, an individualized career advising program. So we have partnered with WorkSource and with Montgomery College, and we have implemented MoCo CAP, or Montgomery County Career Advising Program. And at a later date, would be happy to come back and share updates as it relates to career advising. But for the purpose of this session, we're going to focus on the college career readiness standards. And with that, you can move to the next slide. So this is a very colorful slide. And hopefully you can see it clearly. I'm going to try to walk you through it so that you and our stakeholders who are viewing understand the robust opportunities that are provided to us to provide to our students as it relates to college and career readiness standards. Initially, the types of college career readiness standards that were provided, they were narrowly focused, and it focused only on the MCAP, the SAT, And after hearing from many, many stakeholders across the state, we now have multiple measures that can be used to identify whether students are deemed college career ready or not. So in that first section under the red heading, this focuses on academic excellence and math mastery. So at the end of grade 10, if students have a 3.0 and they have achieved an A, B, or C in Algebra 1, or they have a proficient score on the MCAP, they are deemed college and career ready. Under the blue heading, right beneath that, and these assessments can be given anytime between grades 9 and 12. They have a variety of assessments that they can take, and if they score proficient in both English and math, they are deemed college and career ready. So these assessments include the SAT, the ACT, the MCAP, the PSAT, and it also includes the alternative assessment for DLM and ELA and math. So either one in either of those assessments, but both in math and English, a proficient score is needed in order to be deemed college and career ready. Moving to the right side of your screen in the middle section, when we're looking at the top, GPA in grades 11 and 12. So this continues to be a focus on academic excellence and math mastery. So if students receive a 3.0, not cumulative, but during the 11th grade year or during the 12th grade year, as well as earning an A, B, or C in any of their high school math credited courses, they would be deemed college and career ready. In that same column, going down to career aptitude, what is new is the opportunity for students to take the ASVAB test, or the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Assessment. And this is a career aptitude assessment, and if they score at least 50, they will be deemed college and career ready. There's also an opportunity to take the ACT work keys. However, we don't offer that here in MCPS, but we do offer the ASVAB across our high schools, so that is an opportunity that we can lean into moving forward. On the far right, under career technical education, the opportunities for students to earn a high school or to complete a high school level of a registered apprenticeship or to earn an industry-recognized credential. This is not the same as completing a CTE program of study. So the option there is either one, a registered level of apprenticeship or an industry-recognized credential will provide them the opportunity to be deemed college and career ready. Next, college courses. So if students are taking college courses, if they earn an A, B, or C in a math course, as well as an A, B, or C in an ELA Science Social Studies course, they would be deemed college and career ready. And then finally, if they're taking the AP exams or the IB exams and they earn a 3 or higher, they would be deemed college and career ready. So a smorgasbord, if you will, of opportunities for students to be deemed college and career ready. The hope is that they will be deemed so by the end of grade 10, but certainly prior to high school graduation. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Addison.
Thank you. So on this slide, we really want to provide you with an opportunity to see the impact of the updated CCR, College and Career Readiness metrics, compared to what we were using. And so I failed to include it on this slide, but this slide represents data from the end of the 2024-2025 school year. And so the left two columns show the interim college and career readiness approach that the state had in place, and I don't have it in front of me. We can definitely get to you what those previous metrics were, but you'll notice, for example, at the end of grade 10, 22.2% of our grade 10 students using the previous Maryland State Department of Education interim CCR metrics met. With the expanded metrics that Dr. Floyd just walked us through, the same students, you see a much higher percentage of students who are indicating as meeting college and career readiness standards. And so, as Dr. Floyd shared, that opportunity and our advocacy around expanding the metrics that are included to identify whether or not students are college and career ready definitely shows positively for our students. And so you'll notice at the end of grade 10, and it now increases to 59.4% of students being deemed as college and career ready. When disaggregated by race ethnicity, the updated metrics reveal increased college and career readiness again across all groups. And so you'll see for our Black or African American students, using the interim metrics previously, it was 12.4%, but that increases to 38.6% with the updated college and career readiness standards. Similarly, for our Hispanic Latino students, using the interim metrics, which were more narrow, 7.9% of students were identified as meeting, whereas with the expanded metrics, we have 30.9%. And again, for all of our student groups, you see an increase of the percentage of students who are designated using the expanded metrics. Finally, when we look at our students receiving services, such as emergent multilingual learners and our students receiving FARMs and our students with an IEP, again, the updated standards show an increased opportunity for students to demonstrate that they are meeting college and career ready. And while the expanded definition definitely captures more students, it also signals the importance of our continued monitoring and support to ensure success. And I'll now turn it back over to Dr. Floyd to share our efforts in supporting students in meeting college and career readiness standards.
Thank you, Dr. Addison. And so in collaboration or in conjunction with the work that's happening in the curriculum department, our work is really to intensify the career advising opportunities, CTE options, and develop the 6-year plan. The 6-year graduation plan is actually something that the state is mandating that we incorporate from grades 9 through grades 14. In addition, enhancing the promotion of AP, IB, dual enrollment, and CTE opportunities so students are aware of these varied pathways that they can pursue and the opportunity for them to be deemed college and career ready by participating in these options. To strengthen and early high school monitoring, work very closely with our schools in the monitoring of college career readiness from grade 9 to ensure students are on track to meet one of these measures in order to be deemed college and career ready. And then certainly to make sure we begin to work with our schools to educate them on the newly revised standards so that students can be reassessed, not only assessed in grades 11 and in grades 12. Next slide. Oh, I think that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will start on my left.
I just want to be sure that I'm understanding what I'm seeing. So where you have the metrics, it's page 19 in mine, but it's, where you have new CCR, the CCR that you're referring to is this complicated one that which was put in place in September, right?
Yes.
So does this reflect first quarter grades? Is that what that is?
No, so while the state updated kind of what they call the business rules around this new metric, a lot of it, and if you look back at that graphic on slide 17, what you'll notice is that a large number of the measures are assessments. And in the interim approach, there were assessments too, but a more narrowed view of which assessments counted. So they expanded the assessments, and we have data for our students for a number of these assessments already. So we applied the new rules to our prior year data.
So you didn't use grades?
No.
Okay.
Well,
The reason I ask is because we changed the grading policy, so I wondered if you were going to end up showing us apples and oranges when you come back to talk about it. Do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yes. And I think we can see, so the grades piece, and now that I can see it better, the Algebra 1 course in terms of the A, B, or C, that is calculated into this as part of one of the metrics, or if they met the Algebra 1 proficiency. I do think we have an opportunity to see what it would look like by the end of this school year with the updated grading policy.
Because it would seem to me this is inflated. These numbers are inflated if it's based on grades that are currently in existence. You don't have to answer that because that's how I see that. Yeah, because
Sorry, do you mean the prior years because they were based on the prior grading?
they're based on grades that are
regulations
already there, yeah.
versus this year's, which is
Right.
based on this first
This
quarter with the new grading,
Exactly.
which would actually speak well then for our students, right? Because even under the new grading regulation, let me not say policy, under the grading regulations, we seem to have more students who are able to meet this standard, right? Mind you, there's various ways they can meet it. I mean, am I thinking about that correctly?
So
Wait a minute, though. I don't
we're
think-
not yet, the
No.
data shown does not yet include what's happening this school year with
Right,
the new
right.
grading
Okay, and so
regulations.
that's what I was trying to
Yes.
figure out.
Right.
Okay,
That's what my
I see what
question
you're saying.
was.
Yes,
Right.
so let's look at this
So we kinda
from
have to
our
take this with
strategic
a grain
plan
of
lens as
salt.
With a
baseline.
grain of salt, exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yes.
then my second question is, well, two questions more. I'm looking at these SAT numbers. Who decided that those were numbers for career and college readiness?
We could have a whole meeting about that in itself, Ms. Wolf, you know that.
This is my problem with this, because I know lots of people probably that have graduated from college with lesser numbers. So I just wanted to know who set those numbers.
So it is set by the state as part of their blueprint work. They did some research around what are those SAT scores that would be aligned to demonstrating college
And
and
they
career
took into
readiness.
account bias in the SAT, right? My last question is, what are the specific strategies and supports that you have in place for students who are not meeting the college and career readiness standard at the end of the 10th grade?
So various schools are doing various things. And when it comes to the math and the academic components, I'm sure Dr. Brandt can speak to the interventions that are being in place. But with these new opportunities, it really is about making sure our staff is well informed of opportunities such as the ASVAB, such as the value of an industry-recognized credential. And students don't have to be in CTE in order to complete an industry-recognized credential. They don't have to go to the military in order to sit for an ASVAB test. So our work with schools is to make sure that staff, the coaches, the career advising coaches, the parents, students, and counselors are well informed of the variety of opportunities that students can pursue in order to be deemed college and career ready. And I do want to lean into the statement you just made, Ms. Wolf, around students graduating and not meeting some of these assessment levels, and emphasize and perhaps re-emphasize that whether students are deemed college and career ready by this standard does not negate their ability to go forth after high school and not only be great, but do great things. This is a standard that has been determined by research-based practices for the state, but it does not in any way speak to the caliber nor the quality of students that we are graduating every single year.
Well, I would agree with that, because you know my feeling about a lot of testing. But also I would be concerned, and I'll be looking for you to report on the future, about how you're going to ensure equitable access across our schools. When you start talking about coaches and counselors, I'd like you to tell me how you're going to ensure equitable access across the schools and for all of our student groups. And you may not be able to talk about that today. I understand that.
I just want to clarify your question. When you say equitable access, you mean to the CTE programs?
Now, what
or-
I'm talking about is you're talking about people providing coaching, counseling. How do you ensure that all of our students are receiving good information, solid information, the same information, and depending upon what group they fall in, that they are not being shortchanged?
Absolutely. Welcome the opportunity to come back and share more.
Thank you.
I I just have what I think are two quick questions. When will this year's grades be incorporated into something where we can kind of get a temperature check, right? Recognizing, obviously, we wait till the end of the year to say who's ready or not, but is there a way to kind of do a check-in so that now you know that maybe you're not on the path versus, oh, at the end of the year, and it's like, well, there went a year.
Yes, so what we can do is build a end of semester one, mid-year check around this and as part of our progress monitoring, right? And so historically with college and career readiness, around January, February, we would say, here's what we look like right now as it relates to the interim metric. And so we can plan to do that. We're using this new metric as well.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be great both for students and families so that they know if they need to be doing something for the system. And then also because I think it will give us an idea about how things are working out with the new grading regulations. So to see kind of how that's impacting things or not. I hope not. And then in my other question, and recognizing that the state is the one who sets what it means to be ready. It's not you, it's not us, it's the state. I don't see GED in here anywhere. And I know that for some of our students, they may be had lapses in their education, they're entering in upper grades in high school, or, their goals are a little different. We also had a great bill from Delegate Wims in this past session where students can take the GED in Spanish and not just all in English. We were the last state to do that. And that allows them entry into a lot of really great CTE programs like the trade programs. And so I'm just wondering, doesn't that make them college and career ready? And I know it's kind of similar to the testing and whatnot, and we're measuring by the state. But do you know if there's any conversation about that anywhere?
There is not, to my knowledge. However, I will say because many of our students who are accessing the GED are participating in some of the CTE courses, they do have the opportunity to earn an industry-recognized credential in some cases, but not in all cases. But to your specific question around the GED, it is not my understanding that that will be included or conversations around including them.
Okay, and so then maybe, with what you said in terms of that some of those students are going to be in positions where they could earn an industry-recognized credential, but then maybe we need to recognize that as well, as the state is not paying attention to this issue, at least not yet, because we have not brought it to them, or where we can bring it a little harder. But we can then really gear those students so that they do come out with something that also helps to demonstrate we are preparing students in the ways the state would like to see, versus just saying, okay, let's do a GED. And that gives them something that they can hopefully, professionalize when they get out. Thank you.
I'd just like to ask a couple questions about the difference between initial determination and demonstrating readiness in 11th and 12th grade. So if we don't meet the 10th grade initial, there's more chances to get determination. And how does this, what's the result on our district at each checkpoint if we don't meet what the state would say that we should meet, right? Like, what's the consequence?
There are no consequences.
Okay, great. So these are goals?
These are aspirational goals, and It certainly is the desire that our students will meet these standards. It is data that is reported and shared with the state, but there are no consequences. It doesn't prevent students from graduating. There's no consequences to the district. It is just another data point that the state is collecting.
Okay, excellent. Because a couple of years ago, I had heard about some kind of financial consequences. So I'm glad that that is not the case.
I can add, when students are deemed college and career ready, there is a financial contribution that each district receives based on each student that is deemed college and career ready. So the more students that are deemed college and career ready, the more funding we can receive from the state. but we are not deemed or dinged if we don't.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And again, there's multiple bites at the apple. So if it doesn't happen in 10th grade, it can happen in 11th, or it can even happen in 12th.
Absolutely, yes.
So one more question. Actually, this is something I was thinking about at the first part of our presentation, but also applies to this one. We do have disaggregated data, but there is something that I have heard, but I've never seen it laid out, and that is some of the difference between genders and also by gender and the other subgroups. So I don't know if this is something we should look at, because we want to make sure that we're not missing a pattern, especially when it comes to college and career readiness. There are some data that less boys are going on to college in comparison to the percentage of girls. And I know there's also other genders, but if we could maybe look into a way to check in on that. That would be great for us, so we're not missing something. And I think that's all my questions for now. Any others?
My only question is, if they graduate, which they can, and not be college and career ready, and yet they go on to college, do we have a way of measuring whether or not they will have to take remedial courses or not?
At this time, no. I know a few years ago we used to obtain data from our students who went to Montgomery College to get an understanding of enrollment in remedial courses, but I do see that as an opportunity for us. I don't know, Dr. Floyd.
I can add that there are students who are not deemed college and career ready by these standards who are taking college courses, not remedial courses. They need a 2.75, not a 3.0. If they're a senior, they need a 2.5, not a 3.0. So again, this metrics does not hinder them from going on. And then the college also have other metrics that they use to determine if a student is college ready or not. So the short answer is probably no. But I'm sure there are some students that graduate from schools across the country that might need to.
I think it would be interesting if we could capture some of that. I don't know if we could capture it beyond Montgomery College, but it just seems to me that we have a lot of money invested in this program. And the only other thing I would wonder is, do we even have an evaluation metric for this? Because this is a very large contract with Workforce Montgomery.
So you're talking about the MOCO CAP program?
No, I'm just talking about, aren't they supplying the counselors and the advisors and all of that? Do we have an evaluation system to see whether or not, it's a pretty large contract.
It is.
Whether or not we're getting our money's worth.
So the state is implementing or sharing some metrics that we have to use across the state because every LEA has to have these contracts, and the state is providing the funding for this. So they too are interested in the success. So we expect to receive an evaluation template from the state soon.
That's very interesting that they are funding a program that has no real consequence. That's what it seems like, but I think it's very important. But I'd be interested in the metrics that they come up with. So I look forward to you sharing that in the future. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting as well that there's this very elaborate program, but there's no consequence at all. I mean, I grew up in California, and we had similar testings that you had to do, but you didn't get to graduate. So it was like, if you don't, and you could make arguments for that as well as to why that's not okay. And so that's, I guess, in some ways where I'm going with this. I'm not a great test taker. I'm actually a very poor standardized test taker. I'm not barred in more states because I'm not good at taking standardized tests. And so I get really worried when I see that most of the ways that you can be college and career ready have to do with taking a test. And so I just am wondering if we teach kids how to take tests. Because it's not easy. And now one of my own children just told me, well, Mom, we have to take it on the computer and you have to go in order and you can't go back. So you can't do another, when I had it on paper, I could go, well, my brain can't do that right now. Let me go do this section and I'll go back. Well, they can't do that now. So there's so many issues with that in terms of the way that people and children think and work and don't do it all the same. And so I'm just wondering if we have any moments, not that we don't have enough to try to teach these kids in a day, but where we're teaching them just those basic things of how to navigate those tests, or finding out that for some children that is not going to work taking it on a computer. They need a paper test.
I'm happy to answer that question. In fact, it's a really good one. So when we think about teaching kids how to take tests, we are really intentional with looking at, and I'm going to go back to those district assessments, and they're currently not in every course at the high school level, but in elementary school, certainly in ELA and math, we look at the actual assessment items, and we're really looking to see how well they do mirror some of those standardized testing, assessments themselves, really so that students do have the opportunity to practice, just as you said. And we are doing a much better job at that even this school year, but it's certainly a dialogue that we're continuing to have. It's a great question.
So I just want to get this straight, because I was curious how we compared to other districts, other LEAs in the state, as far as the updated metrics, but we don't know that yet, do we? Okay. And so when they send this template, will that help us see where we're fitting in the puzzle?
So just to clarify, the template related to the expectation of all LEAs to provide individualized career counseling or career advising.
Different. Okay.
And then the CCR, since it was a new standard just released in September, we anticipate that at the end of this school year, all districts will have data, and then we can compare the data from district to district.
Yes. Because I would like to know how we're doing compared to other districts. And college and career ready is actually important. This seems very complicated. I had to really squint to see the slide, actually, because there's so much there in different ways. Again, it does seem very test-heavy, but let's see how this will. I'll be interested to see how we look at the end of the year. I appreciate all the feedback we got from you today, for answering all of our questions. I'm looking forward to more work and going through the strategic plan that was lovingly crafted. Thank you, Ms. Wolf, for helping to lead some of that, and to my colleague, Ms. Montoya, who has been on this committee. I'm new to the committee, so I'm learning, but it was a really informative and productive meeting, so I appreciate that. And I think, unless we have other questions, do any members of the committee have questions? Okay, because this was a discussion, no action is needed at this time. We look forward to continuing the discussion on February 18th, which is interesting because that actually is my birthday, and I believe today might be someone else's birthday.
It's Rita's birthday. Thank you. We're going to hold meetings only on people's birthdays.
So very exciting. And we will be reviewing access to diverse workforce. So looking forward to that. And I think that adjourns our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you all.